Yeah. In a long time.
Welcome. Yes.
There it is. You're on.
Am I?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, welcome everyone. And our next speaker is Neal Parks. Neal is an author, researcher, investigator, public speaker, and founder of the Parks Paranormal Research and Investigation. Neal has investigated hundreds of paranormal hotspots throughout Ohio and the West Virginia area. Neal is the author of several books: Paranormal Chronicles, Tales of Humor, Horror, and the Absolutely Strange, and Haunted Chillicothe, Haunted Holidays, and the Tales of Inspiration, Terror, and Reflection. Please welcome Neal Parks.
You'll have to forgive me if I'm limping around a bit today. I had a sneezing accident when I was trying to put on my daughter's soccer shoes this morning. I can't even begin to explain how that happened. But as he mentioned, I'm Neal Parks. I'm an award-winning author now. I can add that to my resume. My third and most recent book, Haunted Holidays, Tales of Inspiration, Terror, and Reflection, actually won the 2014 Spiritual Literary Award with the 2014 Paranormal Awards based in Connecticut. And that was at the same time when I was at our beach house in July. We were gone for the whole month in North Carolina, which we always vacation there, and then we go on from there to Beaufort, North Carolina, which currently I'm writing Haunted Beaufort. That'll be my next book released next year. But where was I going with this? It's terrible. Yes, on vacation. What was I doing in Beaufort? Okay, yeah, it was the same time as the Paranormal Awards. So I had to receive the award via Skype, via satellite, basically. So, yes, this is a collage of me. I'm a total glory hog. I'm happy to admit that. It's a sin that I struggle with daily. But for the 2014 Mothman Festival, you can see my URL for our website address, parksparanormal.8m.com. The reason it's 8m is because it's a free subdomain. I'm not about to pay for web space. Who am I? I ask that question daily. I'm an author who researches paranormal phenomenon. I write books on this topic and how occurrences of this supernature affect people and the areas afflicted by these anomalies. I conduct all the research and investigation with the help of my team and tie our findings together for stories and my books, and we not only investigate locally, but as it says, regionally, and when able, throughout the United States. My main focus is on ghostly/spiritual encounters and haunted locations. However, I personally do research UFO sightings, crop formations, and cryptozoological creatures such as Bigfoot, Mothman, giant birds, water monsters, etc. I've been doing this kind of research for over 20 years, and this is what all three of my books that are out now, this is the cover of them. First one was published in 2008. My second came out in 2010, Haunted Chillicothe, which I have no more copies of, unfortunately. The minute I got here, they were cleaned out. And most recently, which was published in 2012, Haunted Holidays. Now, I'm going to start off with, considering the title for today's lecture is Haunted History, a haunted history, going from Chillicothe to Beaufort to Point Pleasant to Salem, Massachusetts, Gettysburg, and back. So here are 4 specific haunted hotspots in Chillicothe: the Majestic Theater, the Ashley House, which was at one time known as the Canal House. It's on 104, leading past the prisons, on past the VA hospital. And the Majestic is in downtown Chillicothe on 2nd Street. That's actually a theater where the likes of Laurel and Hardy performed live, Bob Hope performed live, and the heyday of early entertainers. They all passed through the Majestic. This building right here, in this picture, this is known as the Canal Warehouse. It is on Main Street, directly across from Trinity United Methodist Church in Sac and Sage, if you're ever going through Main Street in Chillicothe. This was at one time used as a stopping point and a resting place for people traveling through the canal, bringing goods and services or smuggling contraband. This is the men's shop on Page Street, and directly above the men's shop is a ballroom that was used quite frequently during the Civil War, World War I, and World War II. Basically, everyone that was at Camp Sherman, that's where they would meet with their significant others. They would have a big ball before they would go off to war, and a lot of the times they did not make it back. I don't know why I just did that. Okay, Majestic Theater investigation. This was March of 2009. This is my wife and I on stage. We weren't reciting anything or acting out. We were just walking on stage taking pictures. And this, I have here orbs on stage. Very questionable. These are more than likely dust fragments. That's the thing. A lot of people get confused. They think that because something popped up in the image that it's automatically a ghost or a demon. Could be something as simple as dust or moisture particles that are building up and around the filter of the camera lens itself. And of course, with you moving around a dilapidated property like this, which since then has been fully restored, but at the time was very dusty, so a lot of movement will cause dust to stir. This is the balcony area. Once again, orbs in the balcony, now probably just dust particles. The way you can tell the difference, if you were to zoom in on this type of an image known as an orb, with this anomaly in it, if it is dust or moisture, it's commonly going to have rings in the center of it, like you would see when you're cutting open a tree, or it would have almost like a snowflake effect if it is moisture, which is a relationship to condensation under a microscope. It looks like a snowflake. But if it were truly some sort of an electromagnetic occurrence, which is scientifically plausible, even with the high electromagnetic equipment that you're using to take the image with, it could be a reflected matter. And the way you tell that is it normally has a light ring around the outer edge of it, or the inside of it seems to be this marble-looking mass. That was interesting. Spirit energy claiming this seat. Now this brought some interest to me because the one beyond it is very faint. This one is more dominant. And when zooming in on it, it does not have the traditional rings in the center of it that's common with a dust particle. It does have a milky haze in the center, so I have to count that out as a moisture droplet on the lens or just in the atmosphere, considering that the higher you get, the more mildew that there is within that environment. Now this one's supposedly on the top of the building many years ago during the fire. Some actors got trapped on the top floor, climbed up to the roof. The theater was on fire on one end, and they allegedly jumped to their death. So this was outside, which interested me in particular because normally there's not a lot of dust other than pollen maybe outside, but there are no trees within this area. But Chillicothe is known as Tree City, USA, so pollen from miles away through the air could get blown into the direction of where you're standing and you think you caught Casper the Friendly Ghost on film. Now this is Blood Alley. I'm sure you've all heard of this. In Blood Alley, this is where the mortician would drain the blood into the alley between the morgue and the Majestic Theater itself. Because at that time, during the flu outbreak of 1918, they were running out of room to store bodies. So they were stockpiling them in the basement and in the dressing rooms of the Majestic Theater, and in some homes along the way, they were storing them. And then they would drain the blood into the alley once they made their way to the Majestic or to the morgue next to the Majestic, because they had nowhere else to store the excess blood for embalming, so they would just drain it into the alley, just hoping that it would make its way to the storm drains. And a lot of the bodies they would stockpile at this time, it was happening at such a rapid and fast pace that it was sometimes a misdiagnosis of death, and usually it was just a slow heartbeat, and then they would have dead bodies piled on top of them, and that's how they would inevitably end up dying. So in this alleyway, directly above Steve's head, which is my brother-in-law, there's this happy little mass of something floating above his head. It didn't really stick out in my mind much until we come to an image similar to this later, which you'll see when I get to that. This is a mist that is said to float around in the boiler room. Boiler room's been inactive for many years, but there's this weird fog or smoke or mist that pops up when people take photographs in there. So I thought I would try it. Really, the only reflective material that would possibly cast any kind of a flash would be this pipe but the overall camera angle itself is pointing more towards this corner. So I really just have to make this an inconclusive type of image. Not really sure exactly what I captured, but it's still interesting nonetheless. This is what I call the dimensional crack. This is on the 3rd floor of the Majestic, at the highest point of the building itself. And this is along a flat wooden floor without a finish, and it just sort of showed up in the image. We took another one, and it's along this path. You'll see up here in the corner, a doorway. One of my team members isn't there, but now he's there. So this is within about 5 seconds. We still captured the same strange anomaly that I had no other choice but to call a ghost instead. And there's said to be a man that walks up and down the aisles of the Majestic, and he'll walk straight out beyond where the floor now dips. It used to be straight and would go up to the stage. So every now and then, people will see an older gentleman in a top hat and a long coat walk up and down the aisle, straight out beyond the seats, up to the stage and disappear. So we decided to take a few shots of this aisleway. Out of about 5 shots, this showed up. So I like to think maybe those are ghost feet. So this is in one of the dressing rooms that there's said to be a little girl playing who died in a fire in the hotel next to the Majestic that once had an underground tunnel leading to the hotel, to the Majestic, so the actors could move around freely from one building to the other without being bothered for autographs. So this right here looks almost like a man standing with his shirt collar bent over, his shirt open, and a full-figured entity directly in front of this mirror that one of my team members is taking a picture of within the room, and he stands higher than she does, and it's directly in front of the seat. So it's a reflection of a possible apparition. Here is, I'm asking, is this seat taken? Because as I'm walking around here, this seat that I'm looking at was folded up, but then it dropped down on its own as if someone sat down, then it folded back up. And someone took some photographs of me within this area, and these things popped up, of course, but I'm sure there's years and years of dust that is accumulated on these seats, and just the slightest amount of movement will cause these things to pop up, like I mentioned earlier. White and red orbs with a spirit rod, question mark. You'll see here, it looks almost like a ghost arm getting fresh with one of my team members, losing it perhaps. And up here, you'll see a white mass in the window. What's really neat is you see the red, the word exit, right here, because it's reflecting off of what's mounted to the wall. But directly above that is a strange red mist appearing, almost like a fairy or a sprite. And this is a phantom performer, perhaps, because it's the only mass that appeared out of this image itself, and it's just sort of standing there. And zooming in on it, it is a solid blue translucent mass. It doesn't have rings, it doesn't have the standard snowflake effect in the center. So I'm going to have to say that one is also inconclusive. Back to the picture of Steve in Blood Alley. I mentioned I didn't think much of it the first time I saw this thing hovering above his head. Well, it's still there. And this time it's a little more well pronounced in its overall mass and size. And this is our local historian, Kevin Coleman. He works with us a lot on the Chillicothe and the Ohio Valley and investigations and walkthroughs. And that way we can get more of a precise retelling of historical events. Now this right here, I saw this at first and thought, oh, that's just some sort of a strange jiggle or shake from the outside light causing strange reflection, because when the person took the picture, they probably snapped it and moved their hands like that. But then I noticed this up here, a face and a body. Shoulders, bent over collar, black mass right here, almost like an overcoat. And if you look hard enough, you can see it. Sometimes you have to look a little too hard and you start to see things. This is the Carnegie Library investigation that Yolanda Harris from Fox 28 News followed us on, along with her camera crew. And they featured me on Good Day Columbus. Before they showed this, it was in May of 2010. March 2010 was the investigation, but May is when they showed it on TV for their May Weeks. So they did a big morning show thing about it, and they did it that evening on the evening news, talking about the investigation and showing it. That's not supposed to happen. Okay. Well, anyway, Steve locates enough EMF to cause heart palpitations and induce vomiting. This right here is one of the main problems. The building itself was built in the late 1800s, so it's got 20th century wiring running through it, and now they've got 21st century equipment running off of that 20th century gauge, so it's causing just a violent amount of electromagnetic energy to flow through that building. Sometimes that can cause people to hallucinate. But what's really interesting is as we're walking through the junior reading section, books actually start flying off the shelf, physically, falling off the shelf. There were no mice behind the books pushing them off. There didn't appear to be any kind of a trip switch that would push something out to make the book fall, to give the appearance of paranormal activity. We found something very interesting. In this picture here, we're by the elevator that is said to go up and down on its own constantly. And they've replaced the elevator. They've had repairmen come out and change the shocks on the elevator because, according to maintenance standards, when elevators go up or elevators go down, they normally have to release pressure on their own, and they may work alone. Well, this happens constantly, even after putting in a new elevator system. And it happened to us, in fact. The old elevator dropped down and opened, no one was on it. So my cohort right here started taking pictures, and in one of the pictures, there's an actual black mass in the elevator standing there looking at us, but you couldn't see it with the naked eye. The result, one major issue was 21st century technology running on 20th century wiring. The gauge was archaic, thus allowing excessively high levels of electromagnetic energy to flow freely throughout the entire building. Eyewitness accounts state that the footsteps have been heard where a staircase once stood, shadows have been seen, books move on their own, voices have been heard, and the elevator will go up and down on its own, and phantom odors will linger. The case is still open, and the findings were inconclusive, although all of the activity recorded did not present itself that evening to us. The high levels of electromagnetic energy could allow possibly paranormal activity to occur, which is often a negative response. Now, this is the Gettysburg investigation we did in 2012. That is not a ghost soldier. That is a gentleman reenacting during that day, which I thought he looked legit, so I asked if I could take his picture. Here's one of the monuments. What's awesome about Gettysburg, everywhere you see a statue or some sort of a monument, the story goes one or more people died in that exact spot. So they set up a monument either memorializing that one person or a mass amount of people. Now, this is not a ghost picture of Lincoln. That's an actual picture that was taken in the 1800s. I bet you can hear me swallow through this thing, couldn't you?
Yeah.
That's gross, I'm sorry. So President Lincoln arrived by train at this exact train depot on November 18th in order to deliver the Gettysburg Address. And here you see this monument of this gentleman standing here, and this is a picture of it further away. He was a general who was stationed to look over this rock area. He fought it tooth and nail. He thought there's no way that the soldiers are going to be coming up from that area. It's too wide open. But what he didn't take into consideration was the tree line, because when he was arguing about it, it was fall. By the time they stationed him out there, it was approaching the Battle of Gettysburg at this point, like a few days before it. Everything was covered in lush green foliage. So at the time when it was fall and they were discussing setting him here to keep watch, he thought it was an asinine comment. But by the time everything was green and covered and he was standing on the rocks, and he was like, well, I really can't see anything. So what he did at this point was he listened, because at that time, the slightest amount of movement would get carried by the wind, because that is an entire valley region, almost like a bowl, so it created great acoustics. So he could actually hear the sounds of the canteens of the Confederates as they were coming up to try and take the land. And when he would discover where the sounds were coming from, he would also pay attention to see if they were reflective or not. If the sun hit just in the right spot, it would cast a reflection from a canteen, and he would position his men in each area. And it's also known as Snake Rock. that he's looking down on, this mass area of these huge boulders and a big tree line. And there were a lot of things that allegedly since then have gone on in that area. We unfortunately did not get to spend longer there, otherwise we probably would have spent the night right there at that rock. This is in a barn area down the road from the battlefield. This doesn't show up very well in this image. It just looks like, hey, I put a circle there. Anyway, there's this strange orange mist. No. Strange orange mist right here that you can see on a regular PC. You can't see it here, so I'm going to move on. It's pointless to talk about it. So this is us walking through the tree line area where soldiers were coming up and canteens were being heard. And I went ahead and circled this because here looks like a blast from a gun perhaps. And here, right in this area, looks almost like the side profile of a horse. And a gentleman's face right there with his arm raised. When we took this picture, before we took it, we heard almost like the sound of galloping in the distance. And we're looking in this area because my wife was sure that it came from that location. So she took some pictures, and out of the 3 that she captured, this one looks as if someone is chasing the other person and possibly firing upon them. Now right there is a monument, which chances are if that person was shot and they were significant, where they fell and where they died is where they had a monument erected. This is that same barn. Right here, we're in the darkest part of the barn, no access to windows at this point, and there is a strange haze actually covering the tour guide talking to us. And this area leads up to the loft. And that loft is significant because what they would do is hide dead bodies up there. So people who were tending to the barn or working the barn wouldn't know that there were bodies being stored there until they ran out of room up in the loft and finally had to start storing bodies down here. So they were running out of the room at the universities, running out of room at the hospitals, and running out of room at the tents that were set up outside of the battlefield. Once again, a monument. And this is the monument of a mother whose daughter was actually the first one that was killed when the battle started. Before any soldiers were shot, before any soldiers were killed, her daughter was the one that was killed in her own home, making biscuits of all things. She's standing in the kitchen making biscuits. One bullet goes through and hits the cabinet right next to her. She looks at it, goes and tells her mom that a bullet just came through. And her mom's like, oh, it's probably just a misfire because they're cleaning weapons outside. Just go ahead and go back to doing what you're doing. So she goes back and continues making biscuits. Another bullet goes through, this time through her head, and kills her. So this is a statue of her mom saying, oh, I'm such an idiot. I could have waited for biscuits. This I thought was funny because it's all about perspectives and history, and they're selling bags of Doritos beneath significant historical figures of the Civil War. I'm like, well, how 21st century have we become? And I'm getting frisky with Abe Lincoln here. This is the Dobbin House, which was a restaurant built in 1776. Still stands to this day. We actually got to eat there. What's awesome about it is it's still running the way it was in the 1700s. Everyone who works there dresses in clothing from that time period. The dining experience is all by candlelight. They bring food to you that was, there's a dog in here. That's so cool. But they bring food to you and drinks to you that was used and prevalent during that time. They will bring modern things like soda and stuff, but that's upon request only. That's the outside of that barn where they were stockpiling bodies from dead and wounded soldiers. Once again, back to that whole thing with the Majestic. They really sucked at diagnosing whether people were dead or alive at that point. And I'm sure you've heard stories of where people were actually buried alive in some instances, and they would go to move graves because they built housing developments and whatnot on top of the original cemeteries, and you'd see where people tried to claw their way out. Same story here. A bunch of people died, they might not be dead, but they end up suffocating on the blood and the dead and the muck of those that are dead placed on top of them. Here is one of the oldest cemeteries in Gettysburg. Looks like everyone's still accounted for. And this scared the crap out of me when I was in the Dobbin house. There's this tiny little porthole window as you're going up to the third floor. They have mannequins of slaves kind of hanging out like, don't tell anyone we're here. I thought they were real people. I went back crap crazy over that. So this is back to the inside of the barn, just to give you an idea of the original placement of the rafters, how significant of a historical piece this is. Result. After an amazing weekend at one of the most paranormally charged hotspots on Earth, I can honestly say that Gettysburg exceeded its reputation. We encountered phantom pipe tobacco odors, the sounds of canteens from another time clanging in the tree line, and encounters with apparitions playing out the same routine that they once did so long ago. This brings us to Salem, Massachusetts. This was a few days later, the same summer of 2012. And of course, the burying point, 1637. This was before the witch trials, which took place in 1692. It's the oldest burying ground in the city of Salem. So far, we've got Captain Richard Moore, Justice John Hawthorne, who was the justice presiding over the witch trials. He was buried there post 1635, of course. Which, if any of you are familiar with the author Nathaniel Hawthorne, that's his grandfather. And the House of Seven Gables is in Salem, and there have been several books, stories, and movies pertaining to the House of Seven Gables, one of which was The Crucible, written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, which was about the witch trials. And this was Salem Heritage Days, the week we were there. Now, what's crazy about Salem? Yeah, look at that monument. This is a monument of one of the town's founders, and this is a monument of Justice Hawthorne. And what's crazy about Salem? Well, there's the House of Seven Gables. The reason being is there's 7 gables all around the house. The interesting thing about Salem, Gettysburg was more natural in its history. It was laid out the way it should have been at the time that it was. Salem, however, did you hear that? Sorry. Salem, however, was laid out to be more like Boston. Boston's very busy. Boston has terrible traffic. People in Boston don't know how to drive. So the same goes with Salem. People are driving erratically. No one waits for pedestrians. You just about get hit about 4 or 5 times. And the majority of people in Salem are either Wiccan or practicing witches, which you'd think with the Salem witch trials that they would have either moved on, but it actually made them stronger. And this is the Salem Witch Museum, which ironically enough used to be a Lutheran church. They turned it into the Witch Museum where they do reenactments of the witch trials, and they have really cool mannequins set up showing historical significance of the steps to the witch trials. And they also give you a bit of history on the Wiccan religion and the witchcraft as a whole. Now this house was the house that was featured in the movie Hocus Pocus. The garden in the back was used in the movie Practical Magic, and also scenes of the TV show Bewitched. But what's awesome about this house is there's a very angry lady that allegedly still lives there in the afterlife. She was really mean and nasty, and she would poison neighborhood pets and stuff to get them off her lawn, or just stray animals for that matter. And she is said to hang out in the garden, and if you walk into the garden during a tour, she will scratch you, tug at you, pull on you, push you, whisper things in your ears. This is our view from the Hawthorne Hotel. This is how it looked looking outside. See how a skyscraper, well, their version of a skyscraper made its way into Salem. It's a much larger building. And this is the Hawthorne Hotel, which was built on top of an old cherry orchard that had been there for generations. And it was built, almost a century ago. But the cherry orchard that was there, something happened with a lightning striking, causing a field fire, and the cherry orchard burned up, actually, not to the ground, because it's already on the ground. But that's the Hawthorne Hotel exterior. Now, what's awesome about the hotel, we stayed in there, and every single night that we were there, something strange happened. 3 a.m. the first night, the lights came on for absolutely no reason. There didn't appear to be any kind of an outside terminal to turn them on and off. The switch itself had gone up. We were across the room. So I walk over, shut it back off, get back in bed. An hour later, the closet door is moving, and it's as if someone is inside the closet door trying to get out. So I walk over, flip on the light, open the closet door, there's nothing in there except for our empty suitcases. And we go and have breakfast downstairs, come back up, and the towels that we had used, because we're okay with using, since we were staying there 2 nights, we're okay with using the same towel because conserving and whatnot, and we're not that dirty of people anyway. So we put our towels back up, and I guess whoever was hanging out in that room with us didn't like the way we did it. So they took them off the towel racks and strategically folded them in a different way than the way they were folded before when we got there. And they were placed up on the towel racks in the bathroom, folded in like an old world way that I've never seen before, nor do I think any of the people working in that hotel would know how to fold that way. It's like Subway sandwiches, the way they cut the buns now versus the way they used to. New people working at Subway don't know how to cut it the old way. The London Coffee House, original meeting place for the Sons of Liberty. This is where the revolution got its start, from this coffee house across the river, away from Boston, away from the King's men. They could go, our founding fathers, in secret and discuss how to revolt and how to secede. This is during the ghost tour outside of the house where the evil madam lives. There's a strange circular mass engulfing this person. This is our tour guide. And a strange mist completely surrounding the image itself. And, oh look, witch teas. You can get your witch t-shirt for $5 here. This was a big gambit for Salem. Everything from Bewitched, Harry Potter, Gandalf t-shirts, the wizard from Lord of the Rings. Even getting into Twilight, which I don't know why they were tying vampirism into it. But, oh yeah, awesome story, I just forgot to mention. I didn't want to do that. There we go. Back to the Hawthorne Hotel. On our last day there, I got on the elevator to write down to say we're going to go ahead and check out. Can we leave our bags up here and then come back and get them later, put them on our car or whatever after that. And I'm getting on the elevator, and there's this beautiful blonde girl, and there was a wedding going on this weekend, which at first I'm like, oh, she must be a part of the wedding party, or maybe she's the bride. I don't know. This gorgeous blonde girl just kind of took my breath away. Kind of like when I met my wife the first time. But I get on the elevator, and she's smiling at me and nods her head, and I go, oh, hi. And I looked at her and say, are you part of the wedding party? And she just kind of smiled and nodded the same way. I go, oh, maybe she's deaf mute. So I thought maybe it was like the granddaughter of, it was a really good joke that just left me. She was deaf mute. And she did great things. Helen Keller! Yes, I almost said Phyllis Diller. Anyway, as I'm trying to make small talk with her, the elevator door opens, and I'm like, oh, this must be your stop. And as I say, oh, this must be your stop, she's not there. So I don't really like to share stories like that very often because it was just me and whatever it is I thought I saw. And I don't normally share stories like that because my wife begs me not to because she doesn't want me branded as a charlatan. Anyway, back to the next image. This is a continuation of the ghost tour we were on, standing in front of a cemetery where so many of those that were killed during the Salem witch trial still rest. Result: after a very interesting few days in Salem, I can happily state that there are definitely paranormal happenings taking place in Salem on a daily basis. We experienced many unusual things while staying at the Hawthorne Hotel, and during our visit to the cemetery, where the victims of the witch trials are still laid to rest. Beaufort, North Carolina. This is what I'm currently writing about. This is inside the library in Beaufort/Morehead City. It's a shared property between the two towns, but it rests on the bogue that belongs to Beaufort. The Morehead City likes to say it's theirs. Maybe they had construction people that built it. But this is supposedly the same room where Agnes, the ghost librarian, likes to hang out and thumb through books and make people remove their hats when they enter the room. She was looking at me kind of nervous here. Maybe she realized that Agnes was telling her to remove her hat. This is an enlargement of this mausoleum here. taken in the old burying ground. It's a cemetery that's over 300 years old. Pirates and sailors and soldiers and local townspeople are buried in the cemetery. So I enlarged on this strange glow coming from the mausoleum, and it looks like green sleeves with a hand reaching out for a lantern. If you're not seeing it, don't. Okay, great. This, I'm not sure what to call that. These strange little light mists that just kind of float around like tadpoles. So I blew that up a bit bigger to show you what these are as well, hanging around a tree. This one was very well pronounced, kind of dancing around on its own. It looks almost like Slimer from the Ghostbusters, but much smaller. Result, Beaufort, North Carolina is one of the most haunted locations in the world. Almost every property within this fishing town experiences some form of paranormal activity. This was the original stopping place for Blackbeard the pirate, who spilled the blood of many victims along the streets of the historic town. Oh, we're in Point Pleasant now. And this is the ever-elusive Mothman statue that this child's obviously terrified of. His parents are like, oh, come on, those are the picture, it'll be great. And these are the igloos that hide within the lush green. This was in May of 2008 when my buddy Brent and I came here and spent a weekend and had quite an experience. There's igloos all over the swamp area of the TNT depot. That's what this is right here. And allegedly, I think it was 2010 or 2011, didn't one of the igloos explode? And you had to stop the tours for a while? Did someone, were they like making meth in it or something? Is that why it blew up?
Still dynamite.
Oh, there was dynamite in there. There's still, it's an old munitions depot, so there's still traces of explosives there that were used by the military. Oh, this is me. This is like a scene out of the TV show Lost, like when you find the hatch and you go through the old metal shafts and so forth. This lock was broken and this door was open, so I thought, oh, photo op. So Brent took that picture of me. It was pretty cool. And this is the mansion house. This is one of the original properties still standing from the Civil War and First World War. Yes, that's right. And what's interesting is up here, the light bulb was on, even though the light was on, even though no one was supposedly in here until like 2 o'clock that day, so we didn't get to tour it. And here is another monument. Historical significance here. It's the huge tower that looks like a knockoff of the Washington Monument. And here's the front face of the mansion house. And there's Brent walking. Here we are holding the Mothman's hands. There's a great photo op. He didn't fly away with us. Not that I was hoping he would. Now I'm going to move on to some strange paranormal images that I've collected over the years that people have submitted to me and that I constantly go through and try to determine it as a legible image or something that may not have been doctored. This was an image that showed up in a woman's SD card that her grandkids claim to not have done or taken. But there's this strange haze that appears here, like a milky mist, and a weird face that looks a lot like her dead mother, from what she told me. So I looked at pictures of her mom when she was alive, not post-mortem, but pictures of her mom when she was alive and well, and her face resembles her mother quite a bit. But why the mouth is open like she's in pain is beyond me. So I didn't give any theories as to why she looks like she's in pain, unless maybe she's yelling at the daughter to pay her gas bill or something. So this is an old restored slave cabin in Sabina, Ohio. My wife stayed at while she was doing something with her 6th grade class. So she's a teacher, she's not in the 6th grade, but she's a teacher, and her 6th grade class, they were going through a reenactment of the Underground Railroad. And this is an old slave cabin that was dismantled from Birmingham, brought up to Sabina, and put back together. And this was a strange mist that just popped out of the top of the loft, came across the room, and stopped the mantle. And there seems to be what I would call an electromagnetic haze appearing around it. And this is the crop formation that showed up in Bainbridge, Ohio in 2003. And the overall circumference of this, it's not just a standard circle. A lot of people call them crop circles. I call them formations because it's an intricate design that I don't think drunk hillbillies on a four-wheeler could do. This is the one that showed up in Peebles, Ohio, directly across the street from the Serpent Mounds, which, interestingly enough, this showed up directly across the road from the Site Mounds, S-E-I-P, Site Mounds. Seems to be almost like it's sacred places that are somehow connected to these strange anomalous forms that pop up from time to time. As you notice, most paranormal activity occurs around homes that are close, or towns even that are close to a river, a large body of water like a lake, or even the ocean for that matter. This is the haunting in the hills. These are not real skulls down here. This is from Halloween decorations. This was a picture taken by the Chillicothe Gazette. They sent me the original, and then they photoshopped the orb out of it. They thought at first when they saw it that it was the moon. But it was cloudy that night, the moon wasn't even out, and it's awfully low, lying at a low rate to be the moon, not nearly bright enough if it's that full. So I zoomed in on it, and sure enough, there's that blue, hazy, milky, translucent haze that I talked about with the blue light engulfing the entire orb itself. Chances are that's something supernatural. If it's connected to anything demonic or angelic, or some sort of a spirit in limbo, or just scientifically plausible electromagnetic occurrence because of shifting in the wind or magnetic fluctuation from the moon, it's anyone's guess. That's what's fun about this, because you don't always have to be right. It's like being a weatherman. And this is a picture of a gentleman mowing his lawn with his grandson, and this pops up all of a sudden, and the little boy is pointing at it, like, what is this? And he's looking kind of scared now, like, okay, this thing's not cool, and the grandpa's pointing or waving at the grandmother taking the picture. Now I thought, this is neat. What in the world could this be? Well, I do know that the grandmother smokes. So could it be her cigarette trail from the secondhand smoke getting in the image because of the wind? Or could it be something as simple as her breath? Maybe it was cooler that night, and that showed up in the image. Same thing with this. This was an image of an alleged ghost face captured in Crybaby's Tunnel in Chillicothe. Looks almost like a skull, looks almost like an old man looking really sad. And down here is a picture of a girl in the car that's in the tunnel. I'm thinking that might be the exhaust from the car, because she's wearing a coat and a scarf. She's obviously cold. I'm thinking the car may have still been running, and what they got a picture of was the fumes from the exhaust. And this was taken during an investigation that we conducted at the guest house bed and breakfast in Chillicothe of the ever-elusive, enigmatic orbs. This was outside, and we were getting strong readings with the EMF meters, and there were no power lines running overhead. And what's cool is, I'm like, well, I'll take a few shots. The next shot shows it over here. The next shot shows it over there. It's almost like it's dancing around. What could it be? And this is from the old canal, not old canal house, the Ashley house, which used to be known as the canal house. Strange mist, or it looks like an arm coming up, and that is the hand of Kevin Coleman with a flashlight. And this is my wife's arm right here. This is in one of the old barns that they used to shoe horses in this barn as well. And this was taken in Hillsboro, Ohio, from the parking lot of tire discounters, looking over the city of Hillsboro. Someone just wanted to get a shot of the skyline, and that showed up. And there are a few clouds back here, but this appears to have something in the center, and it's just kind of floating up there. So he didn't see it when he took the picture, and he didn't see it afterward. I'm wondering if something to do with the picture disrupted possibly a cloaking device, if this is either an unidentified flying object or some sort of a government probe, like a drone watching us. It's anyone's guess. Now these, could these be Photoshop right here? This was submitted to me from an individual who was allegedly parasailing over Lake Champlain in Vermont. Still not too sure what to make of it, but if you understand the way currents work, something that massive is going to cause one heck of a wave. and there's absolutely no trail following this. As close as it is coming up to the surface, this little boat creates a wake, but this big Plesiosaurus does not. So I'm definitely going to say that's Photoshop. Now this, I thought at first this was the real deal. Like, dude crashed here, he flopped out, and this is, the do not cross crime scene. Was CSI here? I don't know. But I'm thinking that's a Halloween decoration. And there's a ghost boy in front of my car. I did that with an app you can download for free through iTunes. So shows you how easy people can fool you in these. Oh, this might be Photoshop. I'm not really sure. He looks pretty scared. So anyway, I'm done with talking your ear off about the nonsense I've gathered through the years. Any questions from you? Yes, sir.
Yeah, like Whipple Hill in Salem. I've kind of been looking for Whipple Hill and like places very, very fun and mastering hung everybody. I was kind of.
I've not found Whipple Hill either. In fact, I had the same question with one of the tour guides, and he said that it's not a legit name for it. It's sort of a folklore name, and he doesn't even know where it is, but he knows where it might be. But he said it's not a part of the tour. Gosh, I hate how you can hear me swallow. Okay, great. Well, was it interesting or boring? All right.
In percentiles, what is a spiritual human entity compared to that of a more entity that was never living, such as a poltergeist, in your encounters?
A lot of people who had alleged poltergeists, I've noticed they're either suffering from a terminal illness, they've either gone through something extremely stressful and life-changing like a divorce or a recent death, or they're suffering from depression. Whether the depression has been brought on by the psychic phenomenon of a poltergeist, which in German means noisy ghost, it's anyone's guess, but the cases I've encountered, those things are always a factor. And it's almost as if that negative energy that's within them, they are producing these things on their own inadvertently.
Okay, because we've had several cases where we were able to link it to the owners of the home, where they wanted the effect to be there. And we actually monitored the owner in comparison to what was going on. And we got several coinciding effects by the facial expressions and stuff to the house owners. So I just didn't know if
Just almost as if they were wishing it to happen.
Exactly.
A lot of people will do that for attention, for their own glory.
And they don't understand it.
A good example of that is the Amityville case. Now, that gentleman, well, I won't call him a gentleman, he's a dastardly human being, but George was his name. Yeah, George. He was a very violent, angry man, and dealt with a lot of issues of anger, outbursts, and so forth, and he was terrible to his family, especially to his stepkids. And he wanted a lot of that to happen. He was dabbling in the occult on top of that, reading on the occult, reading about manifestation, reading about astral projection. So he was learning about how to make these things happen through sheer willpower alone. And a majority of that was his own doing. But those events that took place in 1974 truly took place, where that guy kept hearing voices and killed his family. So there's already a negative storm hovering over that home. And when you bring in the want and the need to create more of a paranormal disturbance, you'll get more than you bargained for.
Like a lightning rod. Normally when we start a private home investigation, one of the first things we tend to ask is if there's any teenage children in the house. A spike in emotion and energy like that, and we've proven on several cases that can happen as well.
Haunted hormones. That is so true.
Girls are worse.
Aren't they always? I have a daughter, I can say that.
Same here.
Well, thanks for hanging out with me this long. I have books available at my table and hunting permits to hunt ghosts and aliens and Bigfoot and Mothman. I have those on my table for sale at Salem as well. Glad you, I didn't take up too much of your time, it's pretty good. I think last year I did, what, an hour and a half?